Okay, I'm sending it now. All right, Robbie, feel free to get started.
All right, cool. All right, awesome. Okay. All right, thanks guys for coming out. This is our 5th meeting for corporate strategy. But today we're going to talk about the brief pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccines for the current events. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but we could go over it, some of the causes, basically what happened and the effects on the economy, the markets, and businesses, and then we can open it up to some discussion. But just to review the causes, the New York Times identified that there were 6 women who experienced some rare blood clotting issues 1 to 3 weeks after their first dose of the vaccine. So these women were between the ages of 18 and 48, and one died actually, and the other one's in critical condition, I think at a hospital in Nebraska. So it's had some effects, obviously. In the short term, they basically paused administering these Johnson & Johnson vaccines, at least for a few days. I think they're just basically going to moderate it a little bit further. I think they want to investigate the causation, if there's a correlation and if there's a causation between getting that first dose of the vaccine and the blood clotting. So the U.S. halted their distribution with the military and within CVS and Walgreens. So that's basically the biggest channels for their distribution, also sourced from the New York Times, I think. So, yeah, obviously a few days of pausing the vaccine distribution for Johnson & Johnson. But I think what's more interesting are the long-term effects. So the best scenario here would probably be that, the vaccines are halted for a few days, right? And they realize that there isn't much correlation between the two. There's no causation here, and it's extremely rare, and it won't be happening in the future. That would basically be the best scenario. But, even with this best scenario, assuming that happens, the sentiment towards vaccines or getting them at all, is starting to decrease, obviously, with areas that are maybe socioeconomically disadvantaged or rural, or they have a lack of information, start seeing these big headlines, and that, decreases the sentiment towards getting the vaccines at all, which is a pretty bad thing. Obviously, we want as much of the adult population, as much as the population as possible, to be vaccinated. In terms of the markets, like the rebound stocks, like travel stocks and airlines are experiencing slower growth, and they will inherently be experiencing slower growth because they're kind of tied to vaccine knowledge. But on a corporate level, it kind of ties into mergers and acquisitions pretty efficiently, which is what we'll be talking about. So the big thing here is that large-scale projects like the administration of vaccines, something as macroeconomic as this, can fail because of very small considerations. So it kind of ties into how large-scale mergers and acquisitions can fall from things at the far lower line. So it's important to do due diligence throughout all levels of the organization. I thought a cool example would be to take a look at Walmart. So I looked at Business Insider, and I looked at their CEO, which is Doug McMillon. So if everyone's familiar with Walmart, but they're a huge company, obviously the biggest brick and mortar retailer in the entire world. So they employ over 2 million people, and their CEO has to kind of unite that large, workforce and unite them under certain common goals and certain operations and this and that, which is a huge task, obviously. But for him, he focuses, every single operation on a small scale. I think he does this extremely well. That's why he's elevated to such a great position. When he was 16, Doug was his first job was actually being like a summer sales associate for Walmart. Eventually worked his way up to being the CEO of the entire thing. So I think for him, that's kind of, in interviews he said it too, like it's allowed him to stay humble and focus on every level of the organization, especially the very small considerations in day-to-day operations. And that kind of helps him do due diligence and mitigate as much failure as possible. But it's important, obviously, to do that due diligence all levels of the organization. But that's pretty much it for the current events. I think, if we want to discuss it a little further, we can. But Will has a great presentation, obviously. So, but yeah.
Sure, just give me a second to pull it up.
While he's pulling it up, do you guys think that 6 out of whatever 10 million doses that have been administered, do you think that's significant for most vaccines, or does it just get so much news coverage because there's so much skepticism around the COVID vaccine already?
Robbie, you want to answer that?
Interesting question. Yeah. So obviously that's like, whatever you would think. But, in my opinion, I think obviously when I was reading it, how many doses that are actually administered, 6 individual cases seem like something that could strike like no correlation, obviously. They've identified it to be like an abundance of caution. But, as you said, it's so dangerous to have those big headlines being blood clotting from Johnson & Johnson. That's obviously a serious issue for the sentiment for the vaccines. I guess it kind of blends a little bit of both, in my opinion. But yeah, it largely, what you would think about that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So today we're going to talk about mergers and acquisitions. I'm just going to run through a very high level overview, and then we got an activity planned at the end. So mergers and acquisitions is very important for corporate strategy, because as someone who works in corporate strategy, one of your prime responsibilities is helping your business grow. And there are 2 ways to grow. One is organic growth, which is very internal, normally comes from R&D. But if you don't think your company has the internal capacity to grow or the resources to grow, then you need to go outside of what you have and acquire a business. And the difference between a merger and acquisition is actually nothing. Every deal will be one company buying another company, just when the companies are similar size for optics, so it doesn't look like one company is more important than the other, they'll call it a merger. But essentially, a merger and acquisition are the same exact thing, transaction-wise. So some of the reasons that you'd want to buy another company is to remove competition. If you're competing with another company and this is causing a lot of moving your price down or just marketing, you could totally remove that competition by absorbing that company into your operations, and then all that competition is gone. The next is to acquire new technology and products. It can be very expensive to develop your own technology, so this is a faster way to do it. If any of you have been keeping up with the news, Microsoft paid $13 billion for Nuance Communications, which is a AI and voice recognition company, kind of the technology behind Siri and Alexa of just interpreting what you say. Microsoft felt like it would be more than $13 billion to develop their own technology as good as Nuance Communications did. So they just used that cash to absorb that. And now they have that technology with no internal work. New talent, if you see that another company has employees that you want to bring on. Geography, if you're a West Coast t-shirt company that wants East Coast customers, instead of sending your salespeople all the way out there, just absorb an East Coast company. You simply get bigger. There's really no great rationale behind this, but sometimes founders, managers of companies have big egos and just want to put together the biggest company possible. You can try to enhance efficiency. So let's say you have 2 companies that each have a factory, but they don't necessarily need all that space. Combine the 2 companies, have 1 factory, you're having the same production at half the cost. You can acquire new customers. This is similar to the geography, but it can even be in one place. If one of your competitors has very loyal customers who would never leave, then you just acquire that competitor. Those customers now belong to you. And pricing power, the more market share you have in industry, the more control that you have of the price. If it's a very fragmented industry, one company is going to set a very low price to bring it down. The more consolidation that happens, the better control of the pricing you have. Now on the other side, why would a company sell? Why would a founder that built up something very important to them that they poured years and passion in sell? The most common one of smaller companies is founder fatigue. Let's say that you spend 50 years creating a t-shirt company again, But after a certain point, you just want to retire. You don't want to wake up at 7 a.m. for meetings with suppliers. You don't want to have to please angry customers. You just want to go to Florida, relax, go to Sanibel Island, Key West, or whatever. You made your money. You're a very rich guy. You just want to chill for the rest of your life. So you sell your company and then get even more money. And this is honestly where most mergers and acquisition activity come from. A lot of the times they're not even approached. They just go to a banker and say, I'm done, sell my company. Another is a distracting non-core asset. I'll go more into this later, but sometimes your company may do something that doesn't really line up with your vision. So you just get rid of that specific part of the company. Another is founder pessimism. You could just think that the market has a better view of your company than you do. If you're like, oh shit, I don't think this is a great company and it's going to fail in 5 years, but the market loves the company, you don't want to be in charge of that failing ship. You just want to get out and get your money. Or it can be founder limitations. Maybe someone started an engineering business because they had a great engineering background, but as it got bigger, they realized they weren't great at sales and were holding back the company. To get the full value of the company, they're going to want to sell it because they don't trust their abilities to grow it yourself. And the last is shareholder duty. As you guys probably know, when you're in charge of a company, you're responsible for the fiduciary, or you have the fiduciary responsibility towards the shareholders, which basically means that you need to maximize shareholder value. So if you have no desire to sell your company, you think you can do everything the best more than anyone else. If another company comes to you and blows you out of the water with an offer, you're legally required to take it. If you don't take an offer that is way above what your fair value is, you will be sued by your shareholders and actually can go to jail for that. This actually created a big craze in the 80s called the takeover trend, where these hostile takeovers would happen, where rich people would just come and put crazy price tags on businesses just so they were forced to sell and they could get control. And this can lead to some very ugly court battles, but it does happen. So kind of talking what I just said about selling off a distracting or non-core asset, this is called divestiture. So let's say that you are an ice cream company, but 5 years ago you developed a chip division. There's nothing wrong with the chip division. It just distracts you from doing what you think you're best at, which is selling ice cream. So you sell that chip division to someone who has more core competencies in that area. And you could use this to raise cash, pay off debt, or just increase efficiency because that non-core asset was messing with your efficiency. One example of this, which was somewhat recent, Viacom CBS, which is basically CBS, as you all know, which has a couple streaming services and a network. For the past 10 years, they owned a publishing company called Simon & Schuster, and Simon & Schuster made print books. They held a lot of great IP by authors like Stephen King, James Patterson, J.K. Rowling. So basically, this company was just printing books and sending them to bookstores. And Viacom CBS kind of looked at themselves and was like, yeah, this is a great business. It makes hundreds of $millions a year, but why does CBS own it? Like, why are we distracting ourselves with a business that has nothing to do with what we want to focus on, which is broadcasting TV and streaming? So they sold it to another book company, got a huge multiple on it, made billions of dollars, and then immediately invested those billions of dollars in their streaming services. So this was a situation where nothing wrong with Simon & Schuster, probably one of the best book publishing companies out there. It's just that CBS didn't believe it fit with their vision of what they wanted the company to be. So just kind of recent huge deals in the past year on the screen. I'm not going to get too much into them, but if you guys are interested, you can research. Basically, all these deals, the company on the left or in the bottom corner, LVMH they just thought that they can improve their business model or operations by acquiring them. Uber Eats Postmates was kind of a situation that we talked about earlier, which was removing competition. Uber Eats felt like they were losing a lot of their customers to Postmates. So to make it stop, they just acquired Postmates. And now they're the biggest player in the market when previously Grubhub and DoorDash were above them. Morgan Stanley E-Trade, Morgan Stanley just wanted more access to retail investors and felt like a lot of young investors were not going to Morgan Stanley. They were going to E-Trade. So just to acquire those customers, they got E-Trade. Slack and Salesforce, Salesforce bought Slack. Salesforce just provides marketing and analytics to bigger companies. It's B2B, and Slack is a messaging function for in-house and between employees in a company. So they just felt like that was another metric that they can provide to their customers. And LVMH is probably the biggest luxury designer brand in the world. I can't give you an exact list of what they own, but if you just think about like luxury brands like Chanel, Gucci, there's a good chance they own it. And they bought Tiffany and Company. There's actually a lot of controversy behind this deal because it went through right before the pandemic happened. And the pandemic was really bad on luxury goods. No one was buying Tiffany and Company. So LVMH said, can we get pretty much a take back because we paid this big billions of dollar price tag for Tiffany and Co. And basically you had zero sales this year. Like you're not worth anything. You're still worth something, but not worth anything near what we paid. And Tiffany and Co. was kind of like, fuck you. We agreed to a deal. You got to pay us. We don't care. And so that's like still kind of an ongoing battle, which kind of shows you that these things aren't smooth. And on both sides, you have egos and you could always run to a problem. So as good as you think your deal is in theory, it could always go wrong. So the two main types of deals are horizontal and vertical integration. Horizontal integration is when you acquire a business at the same part of the supply chain and you basically a company that does the same thing. So Anheuser-Busch, which makes Bud Light, Natty Light, Budweiser, all those great things, bought SABMiller, which makes Sab and Miller Lite. So it's basically a beer company buying another beer company just so they can acquire those customers and diversify their portfolio of products a little more. This is similar to Starwood Hotels. Starwood is a hotel group that owns Westin, W, like a lot more. I think Loft as well. They bought Extended Stay America, which is just another hotel chain. Again, this was just to diversify what products they have and just add a new type of customer to the fold because Extended Stay America is kind of a hotel model for longer stays of not 1 or 2 nights, but 2 or 3 weeks or even a month. Moving on, we have vertical integration, which is acquiring a business at another part of the supply chain. The main reason to do this would be cost and control of your expenses. These are a couple made up examples I put together. Let's say Kroger buys a chicken farm. They can make that chicken farm exclusively in charge of providing chickens to Kroger. And the beauty of something like this is because once that happens, you just pay for the prices of the chickens at break even. So there's no middleman company making money. You control how much it goes into the cost of farming the chickens, and you control how much money Kroger is going to pay for the chickens. So if you're Kroger and you want your customers to buy cheap chicken, then you have that, or you could even just keep the price the same and use the cost savings just to go to your profit and bottom line. And the other made up example is Dunder Mifflin buying a tree. I don't even know, a tree cutting down company. That's probably what it is, just a paper production company. So instead of paying suppliers for trees, trees are a commodity that can go up or down. So Dunder Mifflin just basically says, yeah, we want to control how much we pay for our raw materials. So let's buy this and we'll have that control where we can bring down our costs. So basically for any deal to work is synergies. So 1 + 1 = 3, or in the context of a deal, a $100 million company plus another $100 million company. If that were to be a $200 million company after combining it, it wouldn't be worth it at all, just because of the cost of integrating the companies. You may need to take on debt to do the deal. You probably need to pay advisors to do the deal. So you want a $100 million company plus $100 million company to be a $3 million company. And you do this through synergies. The most important synergies are cost synergies, which are synergies that bring down the cost of the combined company. This could be by sharing information, like a patent, or just like a special way of doing things that can bring down a cost. Supply chain efficiency, going back to the previous example, if you are both buying from the same supplier, you can afford to get a lower price. One of the bigger things is management salaries. Normally CEOs make over $10-15 million. If you are one company, you only need one CEO, you only need one COO. So you can essentially just, as sad as it is, just fire one management team and keep the same management team. Obviously, it's never good to have to eliminate employees, but it's one of the realities of M&A. And then moving on, the other type of synergies is revenue synergies. These can be complementary products. For example, if you're a peanut butter company and you buy a jelly company, you could do some marketing together. So you sell more of both products because you market it together. You could do cross-selling, which, let's say you have one customer base and another customer base and two separate products. You use those relationships with one customer base to hopefully turn those into customers of the other products, or even just branding. Let's say there's a reputable company that buys a not so reputable company. I think Chipotle is pretty reputable, but they had that whole scandal with E. coli a couple years ago. So let's say a company that really prides itself on food safety buys that company, then people can say, oh, Chipotle is under management that really cares about health safety. Like, that's a good brand. I didn't trust that brand before. I'm going to trust that brand. One example I put to the right here is that Caesars Entertainment, which is a hotel company, bought William Hill, which is an online gambling company. And their theory was that if they put William Hill technology in their casinos or online, those people who are loyal to William Hill will start to become loyal to Caesars. One thing that's generally known in the industry is that cost synergies are taken seriously because you could actually project them. Revenue synergies are just theories. You could know for certain that you could get a discount if you produce more goods, or that you can eliminate a CEO. All of these things are great in theory, but normally don't come to fruition. So if you ever propose a deal that only has revenue synergies, it's a likelihood that in the industry you'll be laughed at because people just don't care about them as much. And to be honest, they're just kind of known to be bullshit. So one big thing is conglomerization, which has become a big trend. It used to be huge back in the 70s and 80s. It's slowing down a bit, but this is when one company just buys a bunch of unrelated stuff to just make this huge company that you couldn't even describe it. For example, Disney, they make toys, they have a TV network, and then they have theme parks. If you ask what Disney does, you'd have to probably describe like 5 things. GE also does this. They make appliances like microwaves, and they also like are a bank, and they even do aerospace and defense stuff. So a lot of conglomerization is looked down on because it's seen as inefficient, and that if each of these companies were kind of their own thing and they could focus on them, it would be better. Some people think it's pretty ridiculous that GE is making microwaves and also warheads, but I think if you ask the management of GE, they wouldn't see it that way, and they'll love that they're operating such a big company. And one of the downsides of this comes in the book Barbarians at the Gate. If any of you want to read a business book, I think this is one of the best business books out there. And it's about how Nabisco crackers, which, as you know, is a cracker company. I think they own Ritz and Oreos, combined with RJR, which is the biggest tobacco company in the world. So it is a cracker company that makes Oreos, combining with a cigarette company. It really made no sense, but it combined into one huge business. So essentially, right after this deal happened, people started souring on cigarettes and all the health deficiencies and all the health problems that come with smoking cigarettes. So people decided to protest against RJR. But since RJR and Nabisco were one company, the protests also took a toll on Nabisco, and people weren't buying Oreos just because the profits from Oreos were going to a tobacco company. So this was kind of a deal that was great in theory, but since the two were really unrelated and the only reason it was put together was to just make a huge company, it ended up having negative consequences on the shareholders and the people running the company. And so when you buy a company, obviously you need to evaluate it. There's two types of valuation. There's intrinsic, which is you normally do a discounted cash flow, which is just predicting how much cash the company is going to produce in the next 5, 10 years, whatever, and seeing how much that cash is going to be worth today. Because with the time value of money, $100 in 20 years is not worth much. So this more focuses on a smaller time frame, 5, 10 years. How much is the company actually worth if you're looking at what cash the company would bring you? Then there are market valuations, which the first would be comparable companies, which is looking at the stock market and seeing how much stock investors will pay, which can be a fair metric of, all right, all of the stock, how much is that's worth? That's how much I'm going to pay for the company. And then there's precedent transactions, which is looking at previous transactions, previous acquisitions, and how much was paid. And then here you have one of the most important things, which is premiums, which basically means you're going to have to pay more for a company than it's worth, which happens in 99% of deals. Because honestly, if you spend time building a company and are passionate about it, you're probably not going to sell it for what it's worth. For example, if any of you had like a car from high school that you loved, if someone offers you its face value, you probably wouldn't want to make that deal because you love the car. But if someone offered you its face value plus another 7K, you may be like, yeah, I'm pretty attached to this car, but the next 7K would be nice. So basically in every deal, you're overpaying, which makes it even more important that the deal is helpful, the shareholder and company value. All right, so one of the last things before we move on to activity is SPACs. Does anybody here know what a SPAC is? All right, so it's been like a big trend in the M&A market. They're only invented like 2 years ago, but are blowing up and are doing billions of dollars a year in deals. Basically, what happens is a financial expert or a banker will create a company that does nothing. This company does absolutely nothing, and they ask investors to invest in the company. So once all the investors invested in the SPAC, you have a company that has millions or even billions of dollars in cash that does nothing. So once the company has all this cash, they buy another business. So those investors who invest in a company that does nothing, now that that company acquired a real business, they now are investors in an actual business because of that acquisition. And this is just kind of a runaround of the SEC, because when investors are investing in the meaningless company, there's nothing to scrutinize. And then once they're already invested and that other company buys the real company in a private transaction, the SEC has really no jurisdiction there because it's a private deal between two companies. So this allows, if you are a real company it's a way to get investors and to go public very quickly without having to worry about a traditional IPO process and having the SEC scrutinize you. And then the last type of deal is LBO, which is basically a financial sponsor raises debt to buy your company. So let's say you have $1 billion company, this financial sponsor will go out and get $900 million of debt and pay $100 million of the deal themselves. So they plan to hold the company for only a few years, let's say maybe 3 or 5 years, and they actually use the profits from the company to pay off the debt. So this is a great maneuver for your financial sponsor to gain value, because even if the company doesn't go up in appreciation and doesn't become more valuable, if you use those profits that you made in the 5 years that you hold it, you could pay off a few hundred millions of dollars of debt. So then maybe in 5 years, you're done with the company, then you sell it. But while when you entered, your equity, the equity you put in the company was only $100 million. If you paid off $300 million of debt using the company's profits, now you have a $400 million investment in the company. So in that 5 years of time, you did a ×4 of your investment without even doing anything or putting together any more equity. So it's basically using the company's profits to make you money. And these are huge. And some of the biggest firms that do LBOs are the Carlyle Group, KKR, and Blackstone. And if you are a company interested in selling, there's a 100% chance that you're going to be approached by one of these firms to do an LBO just because of how much money they make for the firms that do them. So that was most of the content I have for you today. So we're going to wrap up by doing an activity. I'm going to put everyone into breakout rooms, and you're going to pretend like you're on the corporate strategy team for one of these companies, and you've been tasked by finding a move to increase company value or strategic value through M&A activity. This can be your company acquiring another company, you selling your company to another company, or maybe if there's one aspect of your company that you think is distracting or non-core, you could do a divestiture. Like let's say Starbucks, you could say, oh, we're gonna sell off all the stores in London. It could really be anything you want. Just try to have fun with it. There's like no prizes or anything, but you're not being graded, obviously, so there's no stress to it. So I'm gonna put everyone into breakout rooms, and then I'll bring everyone back, and then you could just do a quick 2-minute spiel of what your M&A idea is. This can be verbal, or if you want to put together a small PowerPoint, either way is fine. Jake, can you set up breakout rooms?
Yep, I'll do it right now. How much should I do? We have 12 people, I'll do 3 groups.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
And then I guess if any of you doesn't like your company and wants to do Heineken, that's all right. All
Okay.
right.
I'll stay.
How about
I'm recording it, so I'll stay in this room. Otherwise, the recording doesn't record in here.
all right. So how about we just meet for 8 minutes and then bring everyone back to quickly present.
Sounds good. Are you gonna join your room?
Yeah.
Okay.
How'd I do?
Pretty good. That was good. Yeah, I wish you had more people here. That's the problem.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I think it's just because we're at the end of the semester and there's like everyone's so used to the meeting schedule, so it's kind of like a burnout. I don't know. We need back in-person meetings ASAP.
Yeah, I just saw your message. Easy there, kid.
Oh wait, I forgot we're recording this. Okay. All right. I'll call everybody back at 8:45.
All right, and then I think like 2-minute presentation each, and then we'll wrap up the meeting.
Yeah, perfect. All right. See ya.
See ya. All right. So I guess for the quick purposes of this activity, just pretend that Jake is someone important and pitch your idea to him. And then if I know the meetings were pretty short, so if you didn't get to 2 minutes, just pitch whatever you have and provide some basic rationale behind it. So I guess group one, you want to go first?
So for group one idea we had for Tesla was in 2016, they acquired Musk's own company that was Solar City. And we thought a divestiture from Solar City would make sense because there was a lot of questions initially when Musk decided to acquire Solar City because it was his own company and there was questions of whether it was actually needed for Tesla. And since acquiring, although they did increase revenue for 2 years, it has since started decreasing in revenue. And it seems to, according to analysts, is a large source of cash flow deficit for Tesla.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I bet. It's kind of a comment. I know at the time of the deal, it was like highly controversial because people were saying Musk overpaid for Solar City or what's the company again?
Yeah, it's Solar City.
Yeah, that he overpaid for Solar City when he owned Solar City. So he's basically using Tesla shareholder money to give himself more money. But so I like the idea of that. All right, group two.
So group two had Starbucks, and we went through the options of either selling off the company, but we decided that probably wasn't a good idea just because Starbucks has such a large market share, probably we thought about that for a second, but it turns out that Starbucks doesn't really have any other they don't really have a diversified range of products and other companies that sort of fall underneath them or that tied together with them. So we thought that maybe they could acquire a company that could help them sort of expand the experience they're offering at Starbucks. You know, you go to Starbucks, not just get coffee, but often now you start to sit down and have Wi-Fi connect like that. So we thought maybe they could acquire the notebook company, the notebook and school supplies company Mead. So that way that they could sell school supplies and notebooks, pens and pencils and whatever at the Starbucks stores so that you could get a better experience from that side of going to Starbucks.
I like that idea. It's very creative because a lot of people would probably say go buy another coffee company, but Starbucks is in a very niche market of premium coffee sales. So like if you were to say, yeah, go buy Dunkin', they're not really in the same market. They don't really compete for market share. So that's a great idea. Actually, I like that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about acquiring Dunkin' at all. So
Yeah,
don't need to worry about that.
that was smart.
All
Mo,
right,
you in that group?
Yeah.
Sure, you helped out a little bit.
No, that was actually not my idea at all.
All right, well, good. All right, group three.
Yeah, so first I'm going to talk about Lululemon. Lululemon's like known as this like high quality brand with like tons of high priced items, and they have like a cult following because of it because it's high quality, but at the same time they lose out on some of the market share because their products are so high priced and they're missing out on the customers who have like the low price items, and that goes into the company we're looking to buy in hopefully next.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. So the company that we are considering doing a merger with is Fabletics. So I don't know if a lot of you have seen it or some of you have seen it, but I know Fabletics has a lot of advertisements running right now, really showing kind of their low cost potential. They do a lot of sales with their VIP memberships, and they also commonly advertise like 2 leggings for $24, which is way cheaper than the price point of Lululemon. And so we were thinking that Lululemon could do the merger with Fabletics in order to kind of corner that lower cost end of the market and people who want athletic clothes but at a lower price. And I think Gary was going to go through kind of some of the more explicit reasons on why we think the merger is a good idea.
Right. Yeah. So in our time, we were kind of deciding the different types of deals, like for example, a merger and also an acquisition. And so we were looking for Lululemon to acquire Fabletics because we're thinking of a similar mindset of how there's like kind of a Nordstrom Rack discount area, or similar to like a Saks Fifth. But another deal thing that I was thinking of in the meantime was also to acquire Peloton as well. Mainly because Lululemon just acquired Mir, which is an at-home fitness company that helps with classes. And so in addition, this is kind of like out of the blue, but I was thinking Peloton too would be another great idea because it complements their new product Mir. But Fabletics as well is another great aspect too that could really complement the product.
Yeah, I definitely did say ignore financial aspects of the deals because I think you probably overpay a lot for Peloton, just because of the way that it's so popular. And it would kind of be cool. You kind of be transitioning Lululemon into like the fitness industry almost completely with the Mirror and the Peloton. But that's a cool idea. Um, Great job, Will. Do you want to keep sharing your slides and wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Okay, can everyone see the slides again? So I really just have a final slide that's about if you're interested in today's stuff, like what type of jobs you would want to go for. So the first is corporate strategy for a major company. If you work for a company like Disney, Verizon, GE, or really any big company, Pepsi, Target, one of your main jobs will be thinking creatively about what mergers you can pursue. But so this job is half of it would mostly be M&A. Obviously, you'd be doing other stuff. This whole club is based around corporate strategy, but if you actually work in corporate strategy, a lot of what you're going to do is M&A. And then if you want to go into consulting, some firms or groups within firms focus mainly on M&A. So if you do this, you wouldn't be focused on putting together a deal or the transaction, but a company would come to you and be like, do you think it's a good idea to pursue an acquisition or a sale at this time? And if you do, is there any certain targets we should be looking at? Within the big four and the accounting world, they have M&A evaluation staff, and this is very quantitative work where you're providing fairness opinions, which is basically for any deal to go through, a court needs to approve it and say, this is a fair price, just to make sure there's no shenanigans going on. So a lot of what you'd be doing is you'd be sourced to come in, do multiple evaluations on a company and try to determine how it's worth. Or if a company itself, like if Disney wants to acquire a company, but they're not sure how much that company is worth, Disney might hire, let's say, Deloitte to do that modeling and do that work to figure out the company. There's investment banking, which is the actual transaction and putting together a deal. Beyond just the financial work that goes into doing a transaction, a lot of it is deal dynamics and negotiation and just a lot of back and forth, because when an investment bank gets hired by a client to sell or buy a company, the investment bank on the buyer side is told that to get as low a price as possible, and the sellers would be demanding that the bank get them a huge price. So there's going to be egos on both sides. So while a lot of people think this is a very quantitative industry, which it is at a very high level, a lot of it is sales and just pleasing clients and kind of like hard-hitting negotiation. And then lastly is capital markets analyst. Basically, the capital markets is just debt and equity. For any big deal to go through, you may need to raise debt, or a deal may be bringing a private company public through an IPO. So if you work in the capital markets, there's a good chance a lot of what you're going to be doing is helping out finance acquisitions. And yeah, that's all I have for you in the slide deck.
Awesome. All right. Well, as always, guys, we appreciate you coming. We'll stick around for a few minutes till 9 if anyone has any questions. I highly recommend next week is our biggest event of the semester. It's our Big Three, Big Four panel, where we're going to be having 3 people from the Big Three consulting firms and 4 people from the Big Four accounting firms come. And it's going to be like a networking kind of Q&A session or breakout rooms. You can talk with them individually. We have representatives from people juniors all the way up through like second year people out of college. So it's going to be a very diverse panel. You'll hear about internships. You'll hear about jobs at a college. I would highly recommend you come. There's going to be a lot of people there to my knowledge. And yeah, we'd love to have all of you. So stick around if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.